I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my feature author of the month of December. She's award-winning author, of course, no other than Miss Cat Rambo.
Hello. Here.
Well, welcome to Book 101, Miss Cat, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. I am an author who lives in the Midwest. I have written, I just turned in my seventh novel that I've written, and my third book of my space opera just came out from Tor Macmillan. Um, it's called Rumor Has It, and it is the story of a group of former space marines who have started running a restaurant in space, and they end up stealing an intelligent spaceship that isn't really sure that it wants to get stolen. And they go off on adventures trying to both kind of keep themselves alive and find out some things about the ship and the crew. And in this most recent book, they're in a wonderful place called Coraland, which is full of fabulous gardens. And so they're very excited because of all the wonderful ingredients that they're going to get to cook with now that they're there at Coraland.
Wow, Miss Cat Rambo, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. And we are hoping for more award-winning piece. What define as an author or an author as award-winning, and why it is recognition significant?
Well, so there's several different science fiction awards. And the one that I have won is called the Nebula Award, which I won for my novelette Carpe Glitter back a few years ago. And the Nebula Award is given by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of Association. So it is an award given by science fiction and fantasy writers. So it's one chosen by the writers themselves. So I think that's kind of cool. There's also the Hugo Awards, which are chosen by fans, and the World Fantasy Awards, which are kind of partly by fans and then partially by a jury, and then a lot of different ones. So, I mean, is an award a big deal? I don't know, but it usually tends to represent a decent caliber of stuff. I know that my book that I won the Nebula Award for, which is urban fantasy, and it's a little short piece about a woman whose grandmother was a old stage magician, and then it turns out the grandmother also was a hoarder, and so the young woman has to go sort out the grandmother's house, or rather houses, after the grandmother passes away, and discovers that actually magic runs in the family, and it explains a lot of the family dynamics she's observed growing up, and it was just a lot of fun to write. And I think it's a good book. So yeah, I'm biased there.
Lots of fun, for sure. So, which literary awards are considered the most prestigious for authors
For authors in general or for science fiction and fantasy writers?
in your genre?
Okay, in my
Yeah.
genre, I would say the Hugos are pretty big, and I would say the Nebulas are comparable. And I would say the Dragon Awards, which are given each year in at DragonCon in Atlanta, are pretty prestigious as well. Um, and the
So
Locus Awards, the Locus Award. Go ahead.
Hugo is the Oscar
Oh
for
yeah.
the movies. Wow, amazing! How do award-winning authors typically differ in their writing style from others?
Boy, I don't know that they differ in their writing style, but I think often that they are very good at expressing that style and very good at saying things in a way sometimes that readers have not seen many times before.
Definitely. So, what common traits do most award winning authors share in their works?
Um, I think that one, a love of language and a very keen knowledge of what storytelling is and how to manipulate its techniques for the best effect. I think that also a willingness to look at the human condition through the lens of fantasy and science fiction. Because science fiction and fantasy is always about the world of our times, the world that we're living in. It's just sometimes wearing interesting costumes in presenting that story.
How does winning an award influence an author's career or readership?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know that one award does a lot. I know that, but I also know like my friend Ian Leckie, who has won. She's won the Hugo. She's won the Arthur C. Clarke. She's won, this, that, and every single thing. I know it's reflected in her sales, and I think that's wonderful because she gets a chance to spread her stories around, which is really I think what most authors want. Um, I think what's a more interesting question is how does the existence of awards sort of shape the outlook of writers in that it sort of gives us all something that we want to strive for, gives us something, that would a shiny lure to sort of chase as we go forward.
Certainly. What genre or themes are most frequently recognized by major literary awards?
Oh, that's also a really good question because sometimes the stuff that literary awards would claim as literary are really, boy, they're borrowing a lot from science fiction and fantasy. Um, Margaret Atwood, for example, is someone who always, she said she was never writing science fiction, but she was, and she's finally admitted it. And I think there's a lot of literary stuff that leans on the supernatural, like Toni Morrison's Beloved, which is very much literary, but it's also it's a ghost story on another level. So, um, as far as which genres get recognized by literary awards, it's anything that the literary awards can get away with claiming is literary, in my opinion. And there's some great stuff out there. Uh, but there's also a lot of stuff that overlaps with speculative fiction.
How do award winning authors balance artistic expression with audience appeal?
Wow. I think that at least I try not to think a lot about audience appeal because I think when you're thinking about that sort of thing instead of writing, it gets in the way of the writing. But I am not a New York Times best-selling author or anything like that, which I think would be a sort of guarantee of writing to appeal. I do think that this new book that I'm just finishing right now has some real appeal. And I think part of that is because I've learned better to construct a sort of narrative that people will really enjoy. So I think that's one thing that award-winning writers think about is how to get better at doing what they do.
Definitely. Looking forward for that, Miss Cat.
Mhm.
What impact does critical acclaim have on authors' writing process?
Oh, Um, actually, it's really interesting because it can be detrimental to a writer. I sometimes coach people. I do kind of like consult with clients, and someone came to me a number of years ago, and their first story had done super well and had gotten on a couple of award lists and had gotten on a number of best of anthologies, and that had been a few years earlier. And I said, what have you written since then? And they said, nothing. And I was like, wait, what? And they said, it's not that I have not started lots of stories, but it's just I can't finish anything. I get stymied pretty early on. And what was happening was every time they sat down to write, they were thinking, oh my gosh, I have to write a story that is better, even better than that very first one that won, which was wonderful because it won all sorts of awards. And so I I tricked them and I said, I want you to write a story that isn't going to be publishable. I just want you to write me something that I can read. And they did it. And then I said, ha ha, I've tricked you. But
Eureka.
that's a good example of how awards can get in the way, or thinking about them too much can get in the way for a writer.
Definitely. Eureka, I got it. Are there any award winning authors who face significant rejection before success?
Oh, sure. I mean, uh, James Joyce's The Dead, which is one of the most famous short stories of literary history, got rejected something like 24 times before it got published. Uh, Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea is another book that got turned down multiple times, and yet it's one of the classics of science fiction and fantasy. Would be, it not getting published would be a huge loss to uh, fantasy, as is Madeleine L'Engle's A Wrinkle in Time, which is another kind of very uh, influential book, in that it's one of those books that people often, or at least used to often, hit when they were kids.
Definitely. So, how do cultural and societal changes influence the recognition of award winning works?
Wow. I think, well, in terms of recognition, I think that part of that depends on whether society is trying to recognize artists or not. And I think in some societies, artists are very important and are celebrated. Like in Canada, authors get a portion of, they get some money when their books are checked out of the library, for example, which is, I
Yes.
think, a good example of Canada, influencing and supporting writers. Um, I think less so here in the United States, and I think that's about to get kind of worse. So it certainly gives us all something to write about, however, and I think that's kind of important. So it's a minus and a plus all at the same time.
What challenges do award winning authors often face after receiving recognition?
I think there is a post award letdown. I think sometimes, and this is true of all, a whole bunch of milestones in a writing career, is that you get to a certain point and you're like, ha ha, I have, I've made it to this step. I've quote unquote made it. Like you acquire an agent and you're like, okay, now I'll just be sitting back and sitting on the beach writing from now on. And that's just not true. And when you win an award, you're kind of like, oh, now the world will come to my door saying, please write this, that, and the other thing. And that's not really true. Um, but it can be useful in that, like the agent that I have, I actually got him after I had been on the Nebula ballot, not with Carpe Glitter, but with an earlier story, which was, it was a nominee but didn't win. And he called me up and said, "Hey, my client Ann Leckie, again, because Ann's a really good friend, said you have a novel that you're pitching." And I was like, "Why, yes, sir, indeed I do." So, I mean, so yeah, definitely winning uh, winning an award can help you network, can get you some opportunities, but I think then you also have to be ready to act on them. If somebody says, "Hey, you won on a story. Do you have a novel ready to go?" You really have to be kind of agile and take advantage of them because they're kind of hit or miss. They're kind of a luck goes into them as well.
Yes. Strike the iron while still hot, as they said. So,
Yeah.
how do award winning authors inspire or shape the work of emerging writers?
Oh, um, I think that they they inspire emerging writers by giving them some targets to shoot at. And I mean that in a sort of a good way, not a bad way. And I'm thinking, for example, of Ursula K. Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which is a beautiful, lovely short story, but which I think there's been several dozen replies to it, including a wonderful one by N.K. Jemisin called The Ones Who Stay and Fight, which appeared in Lightspeed magazine, and also one that appeared in Clarkesworld last year by Isabel Yap, I believe, called Why Don't We Kill the Kid in the Omelas Hole? Which was is a kind of funny and horrific examination of Le Guin's story, which is very much a philosophical question. And so I think that's what award-winning writers do is they pose some philosophical questions. They pose some questions to the people after them, just as they themselves are sometimes answering questions that were posed by earlier writers in turn.
What role do literary critics and judges play in the selection of award winning authors?
It depends on the award, and I think it certainly um, for a lot of literary awards, it does depend on critics. It does depend on people willing to review pieces, willing to say that something is award worthy or not. Um, like Locus Awards are basically, if I'm remembering correctly, the original list is sort of here's all the stuff that was recommended reading on in Locus magazine. Um, so they play a pretty big role. Something like the Hugo Awards, their word of mouth certainly can play a huge role. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about social media is that something can get mentioned on social media, like this is how we lost the Time War, got mentioned by a guy with just an absolutely not I don't want to say ridiculous name, but just that kind of very highly interesting name. And the book just skyrocketed in popularity, so luck of the draw there again.
What is the public perception of award winning authors compared to a best selling ones?
Oh, ooh, what an interesting question. I think it depends on whether it's a literary award versus a genre award. I think that if it's a literary award, then we tend to think of them as people who then teach at Ivy League schools and are kind of in little ivory towers and don't sort of come down to real life often. Um, Whereas if it's genre, I think there's sometimes a perhaps rightly so perception of genre writers as being very interested in pursuing awards,
Yes.
perhaps because we don't have the jobs at the ivory tower ivy league institutions, so I don't know.
What impact do awards have on the global reach of an author's work?
I think they can be a power for huge amounts of exchange. And I'm thinking of Cixin Liu's The Three Body Problem, which was just a huge hit in the United States, or the translation done by Ken Liu. And I think that was a moment that spurred a lot of cultural exchange between Chinese science fiction and American science fiction, which ended up even in the Hugo Awards and the Worldcon being in Chengdu. What was it? Not 1 year ago, but 2 years ago, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, I think similarly, there's been a lot of recognition of some various countries from Africa. That those writers have been appearing on award ballots, and when stuff is appearing on award ballots, more people are reading them. Particularly if it's something that's appearing in an online magazine, where all you have to do is click through, and then you'd be like, "Oh, I like that story. I want to find more by that writer." And I think Clarkesworld magazine has been playing a huge uh, uh, part in that. But I think I was just talking to an agent a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that they're very interested in finding translators to help find the stuff that they should be publishing in English. And so, yeah, huge amounts of cultural exchange possible.
So, Miss Kat, what would be your advice for those aspiring writers out there to become like Miss Kat Rambo?
All right. Well, you have to acquire a cat, like so, right like this. And so let me put
Yes.
this down.
Mm-mm.
Um, I think one of the things that I have done all the several decades that I've been writing now is I keep reading and I keep studying and I keep trying to be better. I run an online school, and one of the nice things about it is because I bring other people in to teach, I get to hear them teach and I get to listen to what they have to say. I just came from a live workshop, which is in New Mexico, and that was with four fabulous, fabulous teachers. And I got so much work done on my own novel and so much kind of thinking about it and thinking about how to make it better based on the stuff that I was hearing from the others teaching there. So, I mean, that's don't think that you get to a certain point and then you're suddenly like, okay, now I'm a good writer and I don't have to do any more work because writing really sort of gets harder and not easier as you're going along. Um, so you can't afford to rest on your laurels.
You need to sharpen your craft,
You
people.
do. You
So,
do.
what will be your short term and long term goals in writing?
Um, I well, one of my goals is with the space opera. You know, I want to be 10 books altogether, and by the time I hit the 10 books, I want there to be a long, smoldering question that by then readers are just like, "Oh my God, what is going to happen?" I want a whole bunch of people excited by that. Um, and I've won a Nebula Award. I certainly would love to appear to just appear on the Hugo ballot would be cool. Um, so awards are fun. They're always something you can't predict. You can't.
Yes.
You have no control over whatsoever. Um, but I think I feel like I'm at a point right now where I can write the sort of stuff that I want to write, and I'm really enjoying myself. So my sort of short and long term goal is to keep on writing and improving and enjoying what I'm writing.
Definitely. Good luck for your goal, Miss Cat. And to sum up our discussion, what unique perspectives or techniques do award winning authors bring to their craft?
What do they bring to their craft? I think an attention to language and a willingness to read their work out loud. I think that's one of the things that can really separate a sort of newer writer from an older writer or more polished writer. Is that uh, writers need to be willing to put a little bit of time into polishing the sentences, into making things sure that things flow together beautifully. That the whole overall pattern of the piece works as well all as all the individual little bits. So I think it's intention to detail is one thing.
Definitely. And to have a cat, people. To have a cat, for
That's it.
sure. So, Miss Cat Rambo, again, thank you so much for sharing your award winning piece to the world. And we are hoping and looking for more masterpiece. So, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Please do.
Miss Cat, can you please invite them?
Oh, I'm sorry. I invite you to read my books, particularly the space opera series, which starts with "You Sexy Thing," or if you like fantasy books, the Sabat Quartet starts with "Beast of Sabat," or if you want to read the award-winning Nebula Award, it is called Carpe Glitter, and it is available from Meerkat Press. And you can find on my website links to a whole bunch of different stories which are available online. I think the most recent couple are from Beneath Ceaseless Skies and Lightspeed Magazine.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Cat Rambo because if we support her, more award-winning piece. And looking forward for your best-selling novel. So, Miss Cat, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Modicon people, see you soon. So, Miss Cat, we have 3 more episodes, okay?
Okay.